Hello, everyone. It is now 5:31. Let's go ahead and get started. Can anybody tell me what is a misdemeanor? What does it mean to you? And before we go on, remember that in these classes, you have to promise me that you will make lots of mistakes, not tiny mistakes, but huge mistakes. Say anything that is in your mind, whatever comes to mind, just go ahead and say it, because there are some times that we know some certain things not that well. We just know it halfway. In this class, in the series of classes that I teach, I want to make sure that we're speaking the same language. In other words, that we know exactly what we're talking about. So let's figure out, first of all, what is a misdemeanor? Go ahead, Omnia.
A misdemeanor is, let me just, sorry.
And of course, no cheating.
No,
don't,
no, no.
Don't
no.
do Google. Don't Google the words or anything like that, because
So
the time that we're working, very often it is anything that is in your mind. Sometimes you don't have time to Google something. So anything that comes to mind, go ahead.
Misdemeanor is a crime, but is a crime that is not very severe.
Misdemeanor is a crime, but
it's not severe. It's not a bad one.
Not as serious.
Exactly, not serious. Exactly.
Can you give me an example of something that could be a misdemeanor?
For example, you are going like maybe you're going like like a speed limit. You're going over a speed limit.
That's a very good explanation. Thank you. Elena, anything that comes to mind?
No,
go ahead and say it. Say it in English, because this class will be entirely in English.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, it is a minor crime.
A minor crime sounds good. So it is basically what Omnia said. That is a crime, but it's not as serious. And yes, that is a very good definition of what a misdemeanor is. And in fact, most of the time when we're interpreting, we call them a minor crime. Mm-hmm. Now, instead of a serious crime or a major crime. And, sometimes I hesitate about saying major crime because it sounds like high treason. And, we're not talking about that, but something that is minor versus something that is bigger or more serious crime. So yes, that's a very good definition. Now let's go ahead and talk about what Omnia said, because that was interesting. She said it will be like something like driving, what have you, in as different ways of driving. Now the problem with that is that will be a crime, but it will be a driving crime. It's not a misdemeanor. So for a misdemeanor, you don't have necessarily to be driving. Can you commit a misdemeanor at the time that you are driving? Yes, you may, but also you can commit a felony. If I was to drive and plow through some people, let's say downtown Denver, in a car, of course, that will be, yes, I was driving, but I'm committing a serious crime. In other words, what is known as a felony. But as a misdemeanor, a minor crime will sound right. Not, and make sure that at the time that you're interpreting, that you don't make it sound that it's not serious, but rather that is something serious, but not as serious as a felony. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the different sets of crimes that we have in the state of Colorado. There is something very interesting, that the word crime in English is thrown into anything that may put you in jail. So if you get a charge that can put you in jail, it is considered a crime. Mm-hmm. If it cannot put you in jail, it's not considered a crime, but rather an ordinance violation, an ordinance violation, or it could be a petty offense, or sometimes just a municipal offense. That means, yes, you got charged with something, but you cannot go to jail for that. Or usually you don't go to jail for charges like that. Let me give an example because this happens very often. For a municipal charge, such as yelling out loud, let's say that I'm walking close to any of you, and all of a sudden I just yell out something, not directed to you, but the purpose behind my motivation is to startle you, is to scare you. And it is to probably for my own amusement to just do it to see how you will react. That will be a petty offense. And it will be disturbing the peace, meaning that I'm basically violating your space because I'm yelling, or maybe something that is going to come up very often in petty offenses. It will be something like playing music too loud in my car. Maybe I'm having a party at my place. And then I decide to crank up the music. And let me tell you that I was in Mexico yesterday, and the day before yesterday, at the hotel where I was staying, some people were playing music way too loud. In Mexico, you know, by the time the police comes, usually they don't do anything, so there's no point in calling the police. But here, yes, it could be a disturbing the peace by playing loud music. So that will be a petty offense, but basically it means just paying a fine, and that's about it, nothing else. Now, there's another charge that will be very interesting. Will be like carrying, let's say that I'm carrying an ounce of marijuana on me. I know that marijuana is legal now, but you know, a few years back, it used to be a petty offense. So some people were so worried about carrying some marijuana, but it was under an ounce, basically enough to make 2 little cigarettes with that. 2 little joints, I should call it, 2 joints. It wasn't a very serious crime. It was not a misdemeanor, but it was a petty offense. And usually the fine was $50 plus court cost. And that was like about $100. So $152, and they will send them home. And there will be some people that will get like multiple charges. Now, for a misdemeanor, of course, we're going to have a class on only petty offenses, and we're going to go through each one of the offenses and the ways that we can interpret that. But I'm just giving you context so that we know what we're dealing with. Go ahead.
What do you mean by, I never heard the word petty offense. What is that?
Petty offense will be something that will be a municipal infraction. And as a matter of fact, that's the way that we interpret that, as a municipal infraction. So it is a violation of a law or ordinance, as sometimes it is called, that legislation decided to pass. You know, it's like they decided, you know, once we started to get boom boxes, if you remember the boom boxes from the 80s, they were big, and they used to play music out loud very much. But now we hear like many cars that they play very loud music while they are driving, or maybe I'm throwing a party and I decide to play the music way too loud. Any of those things, yes, it is a violation of the law because it is basically I'm playing music too loud. But legislation decided that it will not be a misdemeanor. So it's not a misdemeanor, it's a petty offense. Petty offense, if you call it just a municipal infraction, it works very well in most languages. So that will be the proper way to interpret that, because it means, you know, that is not a serious, that yes, you can be fined, but you will not go to jail. The way that you can go to jail, it will be if they give you a fine and then you decide not to pay it for whatever reason. Then at that time, yes, you can go to jail. But otherwise, you know, no. Now for misdemeanors, something that really helped me, and I'm hoping that is going to help you, is that when we are talking about misdemeanors, we have to put them in context. The different crimes that we have in the state of Colorado, we have municipal infractions or petty offenses that are right here. Then we get traffic offenses. And then here for municipal, you know, infractions or petty offenses, in English, of course, they're called petty offenses. A petty offense, it will be, like I said, like yelling loud, maybe peeing, urinating in public. That's a petty offense. People get arrested for that, or for vagrancy. And of course, we have a problem right now, and I guess that is, for the whole country, that we're having a problem with homeless people. So if you just hang out, let's say at a 7-Eleven, you can be charged with, with a petty offense for just being there without doing anything, maybe probably blocking the way for some people there. In fact, aggressive panhandling or begging for money, panhandling, it means begging for money, it is considered a petty offense. People should not go to jail for a charge like that. But let's say, that I get a charge and then, I'm asked to pay $25, for instance. But because I'm homeless, I don't pay that, or maybe I forget, or maybe I just blow it off, which happens very often, that it gets blown off, meaning, people say, yeah, I forgot. Then next time the police finds me, then I can go to jail. They can put me in jail for not paying that fine. So you can go to jail, but because you didn't obey whatever sentence you were given. Now, let's go ahead and continue with the context.
How do you spell petty offense?
Petty, it will be Petty, and then the word offense.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Petty meaning like, very tiny, that's what it means. Petty, when you say, I have a petty problem, it means I have a very tiny problem.
Thank you so much.
No problem. And,
So,
please, before we go on, please ask questions. I don't lose my train of thought. It's very hard for me to lose my train of thought. So, and this class is yours. So please ask questions. Go ahead, Elena.
yes, thank you, Jorge. So misdemeanor, so a petty offense is under the category of misdemeanors, if I understand that correctly.
No, it is way below misdemeanors.
Okay,
It is actually 2 steps below misdemeanors.
okay. So we have felony and then misdemeanor and then petty offense, or where?
Let me go ahead and go through the whole thing.
Okay.
So the way that it is, the way that it goes, the very first thing that you can get, it will be a petty offense, then traffic offenses. After traffic offenses, misdemeanors, felonies. Petty offense, traffic offenses, misdemeanors, felonies. So the most serious crime that we can have, and I believe that is in the whole world, for the most part, it will be to kill somebody. If you commit a homicide, that will be the most serious crime, and that will be a felony. And then from there, all the way to yelling out loud, as I explained to Omnia. So yelling very loud, it's not as serious as any of this. Let me give you another example that in petty offenses, it will be like a parking ticket. If I leave my car in the wrong place, I can get a ticket. I will not go to jail. I will be fined. And it's actually called administrative fines. So it's even a little bit below petty offenses, just like it will be called a nuisance, meaning that is bothering other people. That's what the word nuisance means. So misdemeanors, we can call them minor crimes. Now, let's be very careful with the word crime. Why is that? Because crime sometimes is translated in different ways in other jurisdictions. I've noticed in other languages that usually it doesn't relate that well. So that will be your homework. Omnia, I'm sure that this is going to help you because I have a glossary of terms in French. It's going to help you with that. And you will see immediately the difference. It's going to help you with your Arabic. You will say, oh, yeah, it makes sense. That's why I emphasized very much that a crime, it means anything that can put you in jail. However, the word crime in Spanish by itself, I see blood. I see something very serious happening. And there's another subtle way of interpreting it in Spanish, it will be anything that puts you in jail, that's something else. But if it is something very serious, and that's why felonies are interpreted in most languages as serious crime. Sometimes you can call it a heinous crime. A heinous crime, it means a crime that is horrible, but that will be like a synonym, for that word. Okay, so now that we talked about that, let's go ahead and talk about the different set of crimes that you can commit for misdemeanors. Misdemeanors are divided into 3 categories. As I said before, we're going to discuss petty offenses in another class, but for this class, it will be only misdemeanors. Now, for misdemeanors, 3 different levels of misdemeanors. And of course, it will be misdemeanor 1, misdemeanor 2, and misdemeanor 3. Misdemeanor 1 will be the most serious misdemeanor that you can commit, and level 3 will be less serious. Now, for misdemeanor 1, the most serious crime that you can commit, it will be an assault, and actually also a sexual assault. Sexual assault, no penetration, not a rape, but let's say, and probably you have seen this, or probably you have heard other people saying what I'm going to share with you. But let's say, that I'm at a dance club, okay? And I'm with some of my friends. And then I asked one of my friends, go ahead and push me against these girls. And when I get pushed, I pretend that I'm falling. And I may touch the breast of one of the girls there. But that was my intention to commit that. That will be a sexual assault. It's considered a sexual assault because I'm touching that person when that touching is inappropriate and also is not wanted, is not solicited. So that will be an example of sexual assault under this category that I'm talking about. And of course, that's hardly ever seen. At least, I've seen it in 29 years only once. Let me take it back. I'm sorry. I've seen it less than 20 times, I should say, because now I'm thinking, I was just thinking about this guy who was at a school, and he was, he was like 17 years old. So he was in high school, and he was like in line, and he was pushed, like pretending, to be falling, and then he touched a girl's buttocks or leg, and he was doing that repeatedly. That's why he was charged with misdemeanor sexual assault. But you will see it very seldom. Now, something that is going to cue you in, and very often what I do is that I ask every time that we get a certain charge or that we get hired to be interpreting for misdemeanors, we usually ask them, can you give us the case number? Because to me, it tells me most of the stuff that we need to know, such as, what kind of a crime that is. And you will be able to see the same thing because, as you know, very often in our office, we share that information with all of you. So, for example, if the case, it is, let's say that is, you see that the number is 20M 1617. So the first 2 numbers, 20, it means the year that the charge was presented. M means misdemeanor. If you see the letter F, it means felony. If it is a petty offense, or if it is a parking situation, you will see the letter C, because it means that it's a civil or a petty. I'm sorry, let me take it back. You see the words JV, and sometimes just J, because it's a judicial infraction. So when you see the letter J, it means that it's very little, very petty, very minor. And if it is traffic, guess what? You are going to see the letter T. Now, if I was to tell you, I have my case number is 07T17, it means that my charge, I received the charge in the year 2007. T, traffic, and 17, it means, that I was the number 17th case presented in that year. So it is very seldom that we get to see number one, let's say, for the year 21T, and then the number one, it means that the very first person on the very first second of the year 2021, they received an infraction. So, I've seen it like maybe 2 times. For felonies, it is easier to figure that out. And that's why traffic cases, usually they have 4, 5, 6 numbers after the letter T. That means, that you are number whatever, because, we have, of course, close to 5 millions in the metropolitan area here in Denver, of course.
I have
Now,
a question, please.
Go ahead.
Are you talking about the case number or
Yes,
something
case number,
else?
just a case number,
Yes,
because that
I
tells
have-
us what kind of a case it is.
Because I have a case number here, it only says E667687.
Yeah, that will be the control number for the division. Now, you need more information than that. Let me tell you how it happens.
Okay,
When you get a case number, sometimes the police, they're not very sure how they're going to proceed. So they are just compiling the information. So they compile the information and they give you a number. They don't know if they're going to call it traffic, misdemeanor, or felony. And, there are some cases that they're like somewhere in between, like the example of this guy pretending to fall on girls, and then touch them inappropriately. It's like, I'm not very sure how to file it. Or maybe there are more victims, and then at that time they may bump it into a full misdemeanor or maybe a full felony.
yes.
So
yes.
it's like, I don't know, let me go ahead and wait a little bit. Let me gather more information. Once I make up my mind, then you get a formal charge. And now, that's a very great segue, so that we can go ahead and talk about the court procedure. Very often what happens in a court procedure, because there's a certain procedure, I'm going to give you an example with traffic offenses, and then I'm going to jump to misdemeanors. And the reason that I'm doing that is because it's going to give you more context, because most of us, we get a traffic ticket. So at least we are somewhat familiar with what the situation is or how it may present itself. So the way that it happens, let's say that I'm driving, let's say that I'm doing over 10 miles an hour. In my case, I've been known to do over 60 miles an hour. I got pulled over one time doing 133 miles an hour. So I know how it feels. Back when, the speed limit was 55 miles an hour. So anyway, an officer sees you or believes that you're committing an infraction. And then at that time, the officer pulls you over and says, I'm pulling you over because you were speeding. And then, okay, give me your driver's license and your insurance and your registration card. And let's say that at the time, I don't find my driver's license because I was going just to the store. And my insurance, let's say that I'm in that period where I know that I have insurance, but I don't have it in my car, and I paid for it. And I tell the officer, I paid for it, but guess what? You know how many people say, I already paid for it? Of course, they don't take your word for it. So I will get a charge for speeding. It will be a 6-point charge. Then for not having a proof of insurance and not having a driver's license. Then at that time, the officer writes everything up, brings it to the city attorney and says, I believe that this person committed all of these crimes. In the back of a ticket, the officer writes down their notes. So once they go back into their office, they type everything, just minor things like, I was going southbound when I saw Mr. Espinosa driving at 65 miles an hour in a 45 mile per hour zone. When I pulled him over, he didn't have insurance and driver's license. And then he, checks the correct boxes. And then the city attorney sees that, and immediately they start to think, you know what? I go to court and the city attorney says, well, if you show me your proof of insurance and your driver's license, I will drop those charges. For the speeding ticket, let's go ahead and negotiate. And that's actually what is called a plea bargain. My plea bargain, and you can say my offer, or my negotiating offer or plea bargain, it will be that if you plead guilty to a 4-point charge, I will drop the 6-point charge for driving over 20 miles an hour from over the speed limit. Most of the time I will say, yeah, I'll go ahead and take it. And here's my insurance, my driver's license. Yeah, I'll go ahead and drop those charges. And the other charge, I will change it and I will bring it with this other name. It will be driving only 5 miles over the speed limit instead of 20 miles over the speed limit. You know, sounds great. And then, you know, we'll go in front of a judge and the judge will say, Mr. Espinosa, you were pulled over on September 9, 1995. You were pulled over traveling southbound on I-25 and Colfax Avenue. The charge is speeding 5 miles over the speed limit. How do you plead? Guilty or not guilty? I'm going to give you a clue on that. When people are asked that, the word, how do you plead? And of course, that's something that it comes with training and with practice, that you realize that there are some times that you have to hold one word, because very often the way that is, because of the structure of English, they will say, Elena, how do you plead to the charge of driving 55 miles an hour in a 45-mile-an-hour zone on September 27, 1997, southbound on I-25 and Colfax Avenue? When you're interpreting that, because of the structure of the different languages, sometimes you forget what the question was. So the word, how do you plead? I hold that. And then I will start on September 9, 1995, to the charge of speeding. How do you plead? Yeah, basically, I bring that to the last part of the question. And that helps a lot when you are asking a question or interpreting charges like that. You will see that that will come up when they are asking very close questions. Basically, close question, I mean, that requires a yes or no, guilty or not guilty, or just a one sentence answer. Now, let's talk about misdemeanors based on that. So for a misdemeanor, let's say that I invite Omnia to my house. I said, you know, Omnia, you know, you're a very nice lady. You know, let me go ahead and invite you to my house. Let's go ahead and have dinner together. I want you to meet my family. And Omnia says, sure, you know, sounds great. Sounds like a good plan. Now she comes to my house. And then because of politics, religion, the basic topics that people tell you all the time, never to talk about. Let's say that we decide to talk about that. And I may come to the point that I don't want to have Omnia in my house anymore. And I will say, Omnia, please leave. I don't want you in my house anymore. And Omnia says, no, I'm not leaving. You know, you're not the boss of me. Who do you think you are? Now, like, of course, you know, I will not push it out of my house. So I will call the police and I will say, you know, Omnia's here at my place. I invited her, but now I want her to leave. The police can come and basically present a charge that is called trespassing. We're going to talk about those charges. Don't worry about that. You don't need to write them down because we have them in a list that is part of this 4-class series. Okay, so don't worry about that. So the word trespass basically means that you're illegally at a certain place, but there are some nuances with the word, and we will talk about that when we talk only about trespassing. But, you know, just to follow up with that example, then she will get a charge and she may say, well, you know, I was invited to the party, or, you know, to Jorge's house. And then, you know, he asked me to leave, but I was invited. But, you know, I took away that right for you to stay in my house, or that entitlement, as sometimes it is called. Then you can get that charge. Now, the way that it will proceed, the officer, once again, will get a piece of, you know, we'll get something in writing, and we'll start writing that the charge will be trespassing. And then in the back, it will say, Mr. Espinosa invited her, but then asked her to leave. And after repeatedly asking her to leave, she chose not to leave. And that's why I'm put in the charge of trespassing. Now I go to court, but let me go ahead and make it more interesting. Let's say that let's say that I don't know Elena. And in my driveway, I put a sign that says no parking. And let's say that Elena chooses to park in my driveway. Now I'm not able to leave, from my driveway because her car is right there. So her car is not welcome in my property. Plus I have a sign that says no trespassing. Then I can call it, and let's say that she's gonna go to Ovnia's house and she lives around the corner. And then, the police, I can call the police, and the police may say, you know what, that's trespassing. Basically, I'm parking illegally at a property that does not belong to her, to Ovnia, and she was not given permission to park there. That happens very often with people parking in different places downtown Denver. You can get charged with that too as well. Now, both of you have a charge for trespassing. One for parking illegally at a home, and the other one for not leaving my house. Now, you can go to court, and what is going to happen? The officer, once they write up everything, they give it to the district attorney. In this case, it could be the city attorney or the district attorney. There's a difference between the two of them. The nice thing about that is that in Spanish, I know that in French, we call them basically almost the same thing. We can call it the attorney for the city, the attorney representing the city, or the prosecutor, and that helps a lot. The prosecutor, because that's what they are doing. They're prosecuting the charge. Basically, they're taking assumption for the accusations, presenting them against the two of you. Now,
So, in other words, city attorney and district attorney, both of them are prosecutors.
yes, they are.
Thank you.
And also the general attorney. Okay, that will be for federal cases, but basically they do the same function.
Thank you.
And that helps us a lot. As you know very well, in English, very often they talk about a truck. I was driving a truck, but I know for a fact that in most languages, we need to be very specific. What do you mean with a truck? Is it a pickup truck? Is it a truck where you can carry maybe some furniture? Is it an 18-wheeler? So it really drives us crazy when they say the truck. Is it a camionette or camioneta? Is it, something bigger? What is it? So we need to be very specific in other languages, but not in English. Basically, everything gets lumped together. Now, for district attorney, city attorney, they are subdividing them, but we can put them into the same category because they're representing the state or the city. So a prosecuting attorney. That helps us with interpretation. Another one that helps us with interpretation is the word entitlement, rights, and I'm missing one. Entitlement, rights, and prerogative. Prerogative, as it is pronounced, at a faster speed. In Spanish, in French, I know, and also Italian, all of the Latin languages, is translated just as right, the right of whatever. And of course, for Ovnia, droit, of whatever it might be. But, but the three of them, they are separated in English. In this case, the difference will be to be entitled to something. It will be, well, you bought your car, you're entitled to flatten the tires of that car if you want to do that. You bought a car, you are entitled to break the windows because it is your car. As long as you are not causing any disturbances around you, it is your right or your entitlement. You are entitled to do that. I want you to know those nuances because when we're interpreting, it becomes very important. And yes, we're going to see more examples of that. Not in this class because, as you know, it's going to go fast very quickly, as you probably noticed. I mean, we're already 36 minutes into it. Now, prerogative, it will be that, let's say that I'm dating somebody, and that person decides to break up with me without giving me an explanation. That's their prerogative to break up with me. And I will give you more examples, but basically in other languages, it will be translated as right, as a right, as un derecho. Omnia, were you asking something?
So what did you say? That's his
Prerogative.
priority?
Prerogative. I'll go ahead and type it for you. But let's go ahead and review some of the charges that we have, at least the 3
In other
levels.
words, that's his right. That is his right. Okay.
Yes, exactly. But let me go ahead and type them for you right now. I will email them to you. Okay.
Thank you.
So you can have them. It will be part of this class. I just don't want to move away from the PowerPoint that we have right now in front of you, because we're going to be seeing now the 3 different levels, and you don't need to write anything. However, I want you to write. Every time that we're learning something new, you can have 2 attitudes. One, to be very passive, and then just look at it and not do anything with that information. Very likely, more than 80% of whatever we may see, we're going to forget it. Now, you can improve your chances of remembering more if you write things down. And the other thing is if you say them out loud. That's why in these classes, I ask you very often to turn on and off your microphones so that you can actually say words out loud and hear yourself saying them. There's something magical about your own voice being transmitted into your own ears in addition of writing, because you're involving many senses by doing that. Anytime that you can apply your 5 senses into something that is new, you will increase your chances of remembering that. If you're not able to remember something after 90 seconds, very likely you need to take a break and try later on. But that's basically a formula that I have applied in my personal life, but you have to be very diligent in the way that you do it. There's a certain structure, and I will give you that structure. You will learn it, and you will see that things just stick. That's why I find it very important every single time to talk about context. What is the context of a word? If you try to learn a new word or a new concept in isolation, it means nothing. It means if I was to ask you water, it's the concept of water, we have to visualize it. We have to put context into that. Are you talking about raindrops? Are you talking a glass of water? Are you talking about the ocean? Are you talking about a river or a cascade? How do you see that water? You have to put context into whatever concept or word you're talking about. That's why I try to do my best to always throw a little example, because it's going to increase your chances of remembering that information. If I ask you specifically not to write something down, it's because I know that it's coming up. Okay, like the word trespass, for instance, because I know that it's coming up. Now, for this training that we have, let me go ahead and move up a little bit. Of course, you already know me. And what is considered a misdemeanor crime, we already covered that. And it's considered like stealing at a store or taking money from a purse. And of course, the word trespassing, as we were talking just a second ago, and we talked about the word assault, basically being violent against somebody. Now, the classes of misdemeanors, or the misdemeanor classes that we have, like I said, 3. And level 1 is divided into 2 different categories. One is class 1 misdemeanor with extraordinary risks. When you hear extraordinary risk, yes, feel free to interpret that literally the way that it says that, because let's say that I commit a misdemeanor against a senior citizen or a juvenile because I'm an adult, it can be considered an extraordinary risks misdemeanor. So let's say that I have a fight with my son, with my two children. Let's say that I have two children. I have only one, but let's say that I have two children. And I have a fight with my two children. And I decide to slap both of them. But one has a mental disorder and is under medical care, and the other one is not. So for one, I will be charged with two different things. I will be charged with assault for slapping them or beating them up. But for one will be just an assault, and the other one will be an assault of extraordinary risks. Why? Because the other child that I have has a mental disability, if it is a mental disability or a disorder. So for those kind of charges for misdemeanors, of course, please go ahead and write them down. Even though we're going to see them later on, we're going to talk about each one of them individually. But I want you to start thinking about all of these words. Particularly, I want you to write the word criminal mischief. Why is that? Because it's one that happens very often that we have to interpret. And this is a figure of speech that is very important to get it right. And I will give it to you right, very likely for next class. And yes, it is in this PowerPoint, so I won't forget. Even if I was to forget, it is there in writing. So don't worry about that. But go ahead and write down criminal mischief, because we're going to see that. Indecent exposure, that one too, because those are the charges that we see very often. You know, for theft, of course, we know that robbery and theft in most languages is basically the same thing. But in English, you know, there is, you know, I don't want to call it that they're splitting hairs, but basically they're using synonyms. The thing is that robbery comes from Latin and theft comes from Germanic languages. But you know, they more or less mean the same thing. And of course, yes, there are some nuances that will classify something a robbery, or a theft, or maybe even a heist. We'll talk about that. And also it's a part of, you know, or larceny, because those four words mean the same thing, to rob somebody, but, you know, at different levels. And also it could be, you know, depending on the amount or maybe where it happened. For instance, larceny, that will be the common word for theft in the East Coast. But for us here in the Southwest, because we're part of the Southwest, it will be called theft. So criminal mischief, indecent exposure, and the other one that I want you to write down is second-degree forgery. We're going to talk more about in detail about what it means, so that you know what is first-degree forgery, you know, versus forgery, second-degree forgery. So what are the nuances of that? We will discuss that so that we can accurately interpret that into other languages. And the next one, the extraordinary risks misdemeanors. Yes, sexual assault, as the one that I had explained before, the unlawful contact, child abuse. I want you to write down the word child abuse. That's one that is often misinterpreted. And the reason of this is because it only applies to, as far as I know, 3 different states for this category of misdemeanor. We're going to talk in detail about those charges, okay? Child abuse, it is categorized by Utah, the state of Colorado. If I'm not mistaken, Idaho too has the same classification. It has to be interpreted in a certain way. We're going to discuss that. And to us, in most languages, we have to split it into 2. And we'll discuss that. Certainly, I want you to write down the violation of protection order. And next to that, I want you to write VPO for violation of protection order. Because very often when we're interpreting, we hear, you know, the attorney saying, well, we have a charge of VPO, or sometimes they call it violation of PO, protection order. I mean, it is repeated so often that we have to know what it is. So that's why I want you to write that down, to start to create that link in your mind that PO sometimes it means protection order or violation of protection order. Yes, it could also mean probation officer. Yes, very often that's what happens. But sometimes I've heard some public offenders using the word VPO, and once you see it, you know exactly what it is. Now, failure to register as a sex offender, even though I want you to know it, we will discuss it. I don't want you to write it down. And the next one, third-degree assault, yes. And you can write a 3 and then a little circle on top of that to mean third degree, and then assault if you want to, because we have to discuss that in depth. Now, the penalties for level 1 or misdemeanor 1, the maximum that you can do, first of all, on the fines could be up to $5,000. The judge that applies a fine to somebody who has a misdemeanor 1 cannot fine somebody above $5,000. They cannot say, I will, fine you 5,050 cents. They cannot do that. The maximum is 5,000. And yes, it could be up to 18 months in jail. In certain cases, could be more than that. We will discuss that later. But if it is a first-time offense, we can put it that way. First-time offense, it will be 18 months and up to $5,000 in fines. Now, for extraordinary risks, yes, it will be up to 24 months, maximum 2 years, and $5,000. The fine remains the same. Of course, there's court cost on top of that. And court cost can be translated as judicial cost. That's the way that actually we interpret into Spanish, and seems to work very often in other languages very well, that too. Yes, you're going to get a list with all of this vocabulary, but I want you to start writing some of this information. Now, class 2 misdemeanors, the maximum fine that you can get is up to 1,012 months in jail for a first-time offender. Now, as a practical matter, I need to tell you that hardly anybody gets the maximum if it is the first time. Some people think, it's like, well, does that mean that I'm going to be going to jail 12 months and I'm going to be paying $1,000? No, it means that that's the maximum. And if you noticed, there's nothing that it says there that there is a minimum. The minimum will be $0, and it will be 0 days in jail. Court costs are mandatory, so that's something that they cannot avoid. But, they can get a fine of up to $1,000 and 12 months in jail. For a misdemeanor 3, the maximum fine will be $750. As you can see, it's less than that. And the jail term will be up to 6 months. That will be the maximum that somebody can receive as a way of a penalty. So, once again, the most common misdemeanors are assault. I asked you to write down that. I did. Please go ahead and write down the following one: false imprisonment, because it's very common. The next one, it is a second-degree arson. The word arson, if you don't know what it means, I want you to look it up, but please write it down. I already asked you to write down the word criminal mischief and the word assault. And of course, I'm assuming that you already know what theft is. If not, please look it up in a dictionary, but not in a bilingual dictionary. First, look it up in an English to English dictionary. We have to know exactly what it means before we look it up into a bilingual dictionaries. We'll talk about bilingual dictionaries later, but don't believe everything that you see in a bilingual dictionary. So assault, false imprisonment, and criminal mischief. False imprisonment could be also felony, but sometimes it can be charged as a misdemeanor, and we'll discuss why and how that can happen later on. And of course, I made a mistake in this PowerPoint. I wrote down criminal mischief once again, resisting arrest. And I want you to write the word tampering. Second degree criminal tampering. The word tampering, I want you to write it down. Please, if you can avoid it, if you can avoid the temptation, don't look it up. The word arson, please do. The word tampering, do not. Okay? And I'm going to tell you why, because it can be interpreted different ways. For criminal cases, there's a very specific way of interpreting it. So please don't look it up if you can avoid it. Okay? Why I'm asking that? Because if you learn something new, wrong, it's going to stay with you and it's going to haunt you for the rest of your life. Because if you're learning something and you learn it wrong, every time that you hear, that word, it will trigger the word that you invested time into learning is going to be right here. And let's say that I tell you how to properly interpret that word, then it will be right here, but this other word will be slightly ahead of the correct way of interpreting it. And eventually, we're going to push it back, but it will never leave you. It will stay there as a ghost in the back of your head. And sometimes if you are tired, it's going to jump up and be right here, even though you know the correct way for a word to be used or how it should be used. So please be relentless when we're learning something new. That's why I told you that, of course, if you are to learn something with me that is new, that you don't know, that will make me very happy. Why? Because that's the reason why you're taking this class. I will have more to teach you. Okay? So be relentless with new vocabulary. If I advise you on something, as much as you can, try to avoid it. Tampering, if you've seen the word before, we'll discuss that. It comes in this PowerPoint. We will be able to discuss that at length and how properly interpret it, and some mnemonic devices for you to remember, or some mnemonic tricks or ways that the memory actually works that helps us remember all of this vocabulary. That's why I'm asking you to wait a little bit. Disorderly conduct, although I don't want you to write it down, we're going to see it. We're going to see different ways of interpreting it. And the word trespassing, I already asked you to write it down because there's different nuances on how to interpret that.
So
And
can I ask a question?
go ahead. Go ahead.
So like false imprisonment, I don't know what is that. Second
Yay! I will be able to teach you something good. Something that's perfect.
Second degree arson, I don't know. Criminal mischief, I don't know. Resistant, all of those, I don't know.
Excellent. That's very good. So you're allowing me to teach you more information. You're going to learn a lot of information with that. And of course, eventually we're going to see felonies, traffic offenses, and also petty offenses. But misdemeanors is the first class in the series. Why? Because those are the ones we get to see more often. Exactly. That's the only reason why. And instead of going from the bottom to the top, we're going to see what you're going to see more often. And based on that, you will be able to guide your interpretation a lot better.
Thank you so much.
So that was all for the class today. And I'm sorry that I went over 14 minutes. Remember that they are 50 minutes long, but it was a joy to have you, and make sure to log on timely next time so that we can go ahead and continue with the PowerPoint that we had. So thank you for participating.
Thank you, Jorge.
Bye.
Bye-bye.